Hello, beautiful beings of light. Rick Ely, the Breath of Ely. Oh, what an amazing evening. I'm so pumped. I'm getting ready to interview Christina Luna. And I'm going to go ahead and share this on my other pages. Aloha, Jonathan. Good to see you, brother. And I'm just checking it out. If you want, push this out. And this is gonna be so much fun. I'm looking for my live video right now that I can share on. Let's see, share now. Share to a page. Hey, Mike, good to see you, brother. Let me know if there's any feedback. I'm sharing it in the Live Masters now, and Live Masters TV brought to you by Mike Chavez. Thank you, Mike. You rock. And let's see, I'm going to share this also on my page on the Breath of Ely. So we will go to the Breath of Ely, and we should be good to go. All right, and Christina is just popping on right now, and we will approve her. And approve. Adding Christina right now. Magic. Magic stuff. Okay, so I'll be looking for Mike's comments to let me know no feedback. I'm assuming there's no feedback. Aloha, Angelina. Big shout out to Angelina Romero Paul. Thank you so much. You are just phenomenal for making the introduction to Christina Luna.
Yes.
Rick Ely, the Breath of Ely. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Mike Chavez, thank you for hosting the Live Masters TV, creating the group. And Christina, thank you so much. Mike says the audio is great. Good deal. Christina, hello. Good evening.
Hello.
Will you do me a favor? Can we just like straight up drop into the breath and get centered, balanced, and then we'll go straight into the interview? Is that fair enough?
I'd love that.
Awesome. Just deep through the nose. I tell you what, there's nothing like that for me because I just drop right into my heart center. And the rest of the world goes away and I can give you my complete undivided attention. So thank you again for showing up.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me to this. My energy has been building and building up to this, so I'm very grateful.
Well, what I like to do is I actually like to peel back the onion and reveal this esoteric knowledge that has been, hidden for so long. And astrology, something I know nothing about, is something you've met along the way. You're a shamanic healer. You are an artist of all things, and a beautiful artist. And you have there's so much to you that I'm hoping that you could perhaps give us some backstory. So could you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Of course. Yeah, thank you for asking. I would say that, wow, I don't know. Okay, to begin, I guess 2012 was the big shake, right? Where we all started. I felt, a lot of people, and myself included, I started feeling a big shake in my reality. I was in a traditional marriage, and I thought that I should be really happy. Like, I felt like I had all the components that would make a person like that we would check on the checklist, and I felt this deep longing for something deeper, the greater, more spiritual, like a connection. And there was, for some reason, this feeling of lack there. And at one point, I was so yearning, so longing for that, that I actually like broke the hair off the top of my head by accident. It just happened. And my ears burst and blood and pus were coming out. And I started hearing voices, and it was really strange and intense. And I at first thought I was maybe crazy. I thought I was perhaps schizophrenic or something, but I was afraid to really talk about it with anyone, because the feedback I got from the few people I did talk to was nervous tension, and worry about me. And so I worked it out a lot by myself. And I have come to a realization that during that time, I was communicating with fragments of me. I was communicating with um, parts of me that I had been closed off to, and they were very wise parts. They were very intuitive parts. And as I actually listened to them as an external voice, they led me through this amazing, mysterious journey where I actually started learning about the cycles and astrology through conversing with these voices. I would hear them they would ask me questions like, what if you mapped out every single life experience that you've had and you flavored it, you color coded the emotional component of that? And what if you created an Excel spreadsheet of that? And so I would go into creator mode and I'd get all analytical and I'd map out my life based on the emotional feelings that were punctuated during that time. And after I color coded it and put it in Excel, I identified patterns. I actually identified some major, like there's a 2.5-year cycle, there's a 7-year cycle, there's a 12-year cycle. And moving down that rabbit hole even more deeply, I started doing more Google searches on what's significant about these patterns. And that's how I discovered the astrological cycles of the planets. And over the course of the next several years, I discerned that our body is a microcosm of the earth, and the cycles that are happening out in space with these planetary cycles, we actually experience them as if we are an Earth ourselves. And these cycles actually show up as personal weather systems, as personal seasons. And the more that I really grounded into that reality for myself and let my experience be the wisdom that helped me to reflect on the external data, I learned astrology. And when I started looking at the charts and seeing, well, does this actually relate to other people as well? And so I'd ask them, okay, tell me what was happening during this time. Do you feel that this was punctuated? And the feedback I got was absolutely, this is accurate. And they thought I was a mind reader, but all I really had done was really, really deeply study these cycles myself. And since I came to it from an experiential place, there were parts of astrology that didn't resonate with me at all, because I feel I'm bringing in a different way for me to divine from this. And so that was how it originated. It actually originated from a great place of isolation and confusion, and it developed me through a huge life change. I ended up pursuing a spiritual path and leaving all my safe security, my traditional marriage, all the trappings of a beautifully manicured life. And I went on this journey, and it has been exhilarating and also a little bit scary, but I've learned a lot along the way. And in the end, it all is leading us back to the fact that we are all home anyway, that we're all one and we're all home.
What you were describing is something that I've felt personally is this, or maybe even what I've experienced personally as a dark night of the soul. one might say, you know, where you go to a place where you're just like utter chaos, confusion, and unknowing. Like for me, it was getting to a place where there was nothing left of it. There was everything that I had identified with, uh, you know, the persona. I am statements, you know, I'm this husband, I'm this father, I'm this business person. You know, you know, my wealth, all of that stuff that, you know, was gone. Yet I'm still married. I'm 20 years now. I mean, I'm very fortunate. Not many women in this world that would put up with me, quite honestly. My poor wife, she's a saint. There's no doubt. I mean that really. She's a saint. She's a divine feminine. She's a goddess, and she doesn't even know it. But I best to remind her continuously that is my role as a divine masculine, holding space as the container for all of that beautiful femininity to unfold and you know and to be that safe place, that safe home, and I'm doing my best. Not perfect, but at the same time you know, we are perfect. You know, I say we're not perfect, but I are perfect. I believe that what you're describing is um, many of us are afraid to share. And so, in your vulnerability, in your ability to come out and be transparent, unique, authentic self that you are, it gives us permission to do the same. And this has been my journey, Breath of Eli, coming out, being the authentic me, voice. What you shared with me in our brief encounter, where I'd given you some information, you had mapped out a soul path, and then we spent an hour and a half going over this soul path, and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, complete, having no knowledge or understanding of a soul. So this is your authentic voice. This is your passion and backstory on how you got there. You know, through a non-traditional. Where where are you going with this, Christina? With this, because you're not only that, you know, this is just one aspect of you, one small aspect of you. So where are you taking this?
Well, so this was one small aspect. In the midst of all of this, I was actually also studying neurokinetic therapy, how the motor control center of the brain connects to the way we move our bodies. And I was doing a lot of body work. So I was studying not only the internal spiritual blueprint climate of a person, but also the way people get conditioned movements. And I'm a pattern finder. I actually, because I breathe in and live in this language of cycles and patterns, I really quickly started putting that map together too. And last year I started teaching a really deep, in-depth course to very small groups of people that corresponded the physical and the spiritual and the shamanic and the creative. And after I spent a year kind of proving that model to myself and through the feedback of my students, I decided that the next place I'm going is, how do you scale this and have an impact over the many? How do I actually bring this tool, since we know it works and we know that it's can create divine transformation for people who don't even know anything about astrology. We don't have to use the language of the esoteric to actually bring the practical tool. It doesn't even have to be labeled spiritual. It's practical. And I know that part of my journey on this planet is to be that bridge between the intangible and the tangible, and make that access point, like make that accessible. And so my dream is that not only do I serve people going into depth with how they can actually use this tool to transform their lives, but create a manual that can be distributed like over millions of people, that it becomes a new model for using astrology in your daily life to meet your fundamental needs. And the 6 fundamental needs are broadly recognized by psychologists and coaches and archetypal philosophers. And astrology very clearly shows how these needs develop through a life cycle and through an earth growth cycle. So it seems like the next pioneering place for me to go would be to create something that anyone can access, that anyone can dive deeply into. And I hope that by providing that tool, more people will reach that place of fulfillment, whether they're an achiever, whether they're like a, I don't, any there's a bunch of different labels I was going to throw out there, but really depending on whatever you identify as, there's probably a need that you're seeking to meet with that label. And I believe that if there was a manual for recognizing that you're perfect for achieving that need in that way, that there can be a lot of self-acceptance and love, and that will lead to great peace and fulfillment and living in grace. And that's my greatest hope for humanity, is just to find that grace moment.
Can you talk about the fundamental needs?
Oh yeah.
That would be.
So,
thank you.
So these can be described with different adjectives, but the way I describe them is that there's a need to balance in our significant identity, in a separate identity from the whole. And so that first need is for significant identity.
Okay.
Right. The second.
In identity.
Pardon me?
I'm going to write them down as we're going, so I'm just.
Okay.
Significant
identity. And the next need is the need for stability, or certainty is another way of saying it.
Stability.
No, stability. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know my wife needs that a lot.
Well,
don't always provide that stability, but it's I know it's much sought after at times.
It's these needs actually develop through our early development. So the need for significant identity develops when we're between 1 or birth and 2. The need for stability develops between like 2 and 4. And so the next need is a need for growth. And that has to do with our beliefs and mindset. That develops when our thinking brain starts to get really active between like 4 and 7, 4 and 5. And the next need is a need for belonging.
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 Yeah, that was what you were talking about in that in your story, that connectedness that you were searching for that was missing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. For me, we can go into personal stuff. We can go into yours and mine after to kind of personalize it. But yes, belonging can be met here in our physical tribes or family, or it can be met more fully by having a spiritual belonging, by having a more esoteric connection with source or God or spirit. And so then the 5th need is a need for excitement.
Excitement. I know that one.
And the 6th need is a need for service.
Service. Okay. So significant identity, stability, certainty, growth, belonging, and excitement.
And service.
Service. In service of one another, which is what you are all about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and looking at your chart, when we looked at your chart, it really, every person has a different orientation for meeting these needs. Like someone might want to fulfill their need for certainty in their relationships, and another person is going to fulfill their need for certainty in the work that they do. And neither of these are wrong. In fact, by recognizing what's in your birth chart and understanding that meeting your need in your relationship is a thing for you, then you can just own that and ask for it. Ask your relationships for it, and own how it is exactly that you want it met. I had an incredible breakthrough by looking at my own chart. If right now the sun is in Aries, and Aries, the Aries Libra axis is the first need, the need for significance, significant identity. And so right now I'm in the season, we're all in the season of fulfilling our need for significance or identity. So right now, while the sun is in Aries, every person is kind of having a moment where if they've met their need for significance well, then they're feeling really fulfilled and happy right now. And depending on how they fulfill that need depends on, how super happy they are. For me, I've got that need for significance in a place in my chart that is actually on my purpose axis. And I would fulfill that need by actually stepping out and fulfilling my purpose. And when I'm not stepping out and fulfilling my purpose, when I have this fear that I want to play small, or I get a little bit nervous about fulfilling that need for significance, I actually drop into a different place. I drop into an internal home space where I actually feel really vulnerable and really emotional. And I will create emotional chaos inside of my body, because what I really want in that space is to be held and loved by a nurturing person, by a mother or a lover. And when I was unaware of this need to be nurtured this way, it almost felt manipulative. Like I would create a problem so that I could hopefully coax out that need, getting that need met by being hugged. And that's what I would do instead of actually stepping into my purpose. So there's a dynamic to how we meet this need. There's a whole spectrum. There's an unconscious manipulative way. And I don't mean manipulative in a negative connotation. What I mean is there's an unconscious, unfulfilling way to meet the need.
I completely resonate with what you're saying. In other words, there's strategies that we run to get what we are lacking or what we need. And so you've got innate unconscious ability to run a strategy. It's running whether you know it or not. And
Absolutely. The thing is, we must meet these needs. And if we're not comfortable, if I'm not comfortable meeting my need for significance through stepping into my purpose, then I will meet it a different way. I'll meet it by feeling significant because I've got an emotional, chaotic situation, and I want someone to see that I'm significant and hold me. And it's showing up in my my access point between nurturing in my home and the legacy that I leave. So currently, I'm in the place of the legacy I want to leave on the earth. And this is fulfilling my need for certainty in a really tangible way. Whereas earlier in the day and earlier when I'm not necessarily on a Facebook Live, I would, I actually made myself sick this week, because in some ways being sick makes me feel a little significant. I've got an excuse for being a little introverted or a little whatever. And so I noticed that, and now that I know it, it feels like a divine joke. It feels like it's a cosmic, the cosmic humor of whoa, I could so much more fulfillingly meet this need. And so that's just one little, you can dive so deeply into this. And I know that it's not complicated. I know there's a way to just map this so clearly so that each person could lean into, wow, where am I on the spectrum? Am I consciously meeting this need and feeling fulfilled? Or do I feel like I'm not meeting that need and I am constantly hungry for it? Something that shows up a lot when I'm talking with people is they perceive perhaps one of their parents to be emotionally needy or manipulative. And it's really irritating for us sometimes when we recognize that one of our parents is maybe emotionally needy or manipulative. And what's beautiful about understanding the needs is that if we actually take a little bit of a higher perspective on this, we see, wow, is it possible that this person we love so much is just striving to meet their need for significance? Is it possible that they perhaps are unconscious of how to meet that need? And is it possible that I could help them fulfill that in our relationship because I love them so much? And is it possible that that might be exactly the love that they're striving to receive? And so there's not just the personal healing component here, but there's a expansive overlap in all of our relationships that occurs when we understand this for ourselves.
Yeah, what you're describing for me is just the art of learning compassion and listening and being that which it was we're which is love, which is uh, all of the relationships, especially like my family. Within my family, that is the fastest way for me to trigger. Right, I can be out in public and be just stoic, and you know, in a place where I am body like the my truth, my love, an unending love, and yet one of my children will something, I'll be like, what? It's that because it's so close, it's so
Mm-hmm.
hard, and it's those relationships that are so close to. They really are those mirrors, and when I say, I use the term mirrors. I talk about shadow work. I talk about unity consciousness. I talk about a whole lot of different. Make a lot of sense to me, and I think what you're suggesting brings so much practicality out there. It's a practical application, everyday, use. How do you apply it to your own life? Um, what are your thoughts on consciousness, where we are at this moment in time in humanity as a human race, as a spiritual being having a human experience? Where are we, Christina?
Oh, well, I have theories.
Are you comfortable talking about those theories?
Of course, yeah. And, you know, my theories come to me more in images, but I can use an astrological map to talk about my theory. I actually see our human consciousness as starting from a central point, and then expanding like a torus around like a donut, and then it comes back under and through back to singularity and out. But what I'm sensing is that we have made that journey from crystal to higher creative consciousness to all the way to human form, and that even in human form we had to move through stages of opening and awakening through the chakra systems. And that when we finally get to the outer realm of that torus, the furthest point of separation possible, where in astrology that would be Virgo. Virgo would be the furthest tippy point away from the singularity. It would be most sovereign, most separate. We would hit that point where we've come as far as we can, and now we're heading back. And so I believe that the line that we're straddling right now, that we started straddling in 2012, is actually a line heading back inward and back toward singularity. And it's a long journey when we think about time, but it doesn't have to take a long time, because actually once we come to sovereignty at that outer point, the inward journey is actually, it can take an instant. If you think it's going to take as much time as this, it's only because we were using a linear model to kind of create that separation in the first place. And I believe that as we head back towards center, that center point is actually within the hearts of each of us. And so basically, if you use the body as a diagram, the center, my torus would be sideways, the heart would come out, and the furthest point would be maybe my mind, and then the mind would be heading back down to the heart. And so I see that everything that's happening right now was always going to happen, and that the turning shift that we felt is actually one back toward singularity. And I believe that when we were in earlier stages of consciousness, we had so much more connectedness to all that is. We actually felt the elements, we felt the spheres, we felt this connectedness to everything. And the sign that we've gotten to that external point is that we can actually live as islands, that we feel we can live as islands. We can feel so separate, not only in our sovereignty from God, but we can feel that sovereignty from humans even. And I believe that we had to kind of reach that frontier of separateness to feel the longing that would bring us back, to feel that desire to come back and be whole and one with all that is again. And so I see we're on that line. It's an exciting line to be on, in my opinion. And I don't, I have no idea what will happen as we move forward from that space, because um, we're on the frontier, I don't know how many times we've spun around this thing, but that's my perception.
I don't know how many times we've been around this thing. Okay, so that opens up to my next question. Do you think that there's a possibility that we could have had past lives? Have we lived, what are the odds of that?
Well, I've done a lot of work around this actually in the shamanic tradition that I've been a part of. We get to step into different timelines of our soul consciousness through journeying, and we actually can retrieve the wisdom from the last few minutes of some important lifetimes to actually discern the types of beliefs that we had in those final moments. And I've had some really profound experiences with that. And the way I understand it is that it's, again, parts of me, it's different expressions of me, it's different fields of consciousness that my soul has embodied in. And I had a conversation recently with some very wise people, and we were talking about snowflakes. We were talking about how every single snowflake that is formed, they say that every snowflake is unique and special, and that no two are the same. And in this conversation, we were saying, well, then if everyone's a one of, then why would there be reincarnation? You just have one snowflake and it falls to the ground and melts, and that's the end of that snowflake. And I said, yes, but the water that created the snowflake has been on the earth this whole time. That water wasn't new. It's the same water taking a new form every cycle. And so I kind of feel that we are in some ways a representation of a unique snowflake in every lifetime, but the water and the matter that makes up this body, the spirit that makes up this body, is ancient and has been here since the beginning and has been in the universe since before the earth. Like we are ancient. The matter of us is ancient. And then that balances with the paradox that this has never happened before.
I, I took some time here a couple weeks ago, and I was writing. I had a little bit of solitude, and came up with some other thought processes along the way that if I might just share it with you. And
Please.
Yeah, it was this understanding, if you will, that the place where all information existed, like the well, some people talk about the like Akashic records, or I'm not sure if there's some other terms, right? Where I understood that to be a place of complete neutrality, and that was where I was completely unemotional, completely unattached, completely neutral to whatever was going on, where that was where all of the information existed, was in that neutrality, and that the peace, what I describe as the peace that passes all understanding. And from that place is where I understood that I could create anything and anything. I could manifest anything that I wanted to in the physical form. Because the moment that I give it meaning, whether I have a judgment or I'm saying it's good or it's bad, or I'm giving it some polarity, I'm identifying. That's at the point where it's the I am, the egoic aspect of me, which is the much needed aspect in order to create any kind of physicality. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this experience, which is fascinating to say because I know we're so much more than ego, right? But from that place of neutrality, then I could create anything. And but yet I still had to get outside of the egoic aspect in order to get to that place where I could create anything and everything, where it wasn't just a motivation out of an influence of stimulus. When I say stimulus, I'm referring to outside interference. Outside, I've got to do this based on manipulation, coercion, uh, some sort of other influence. I get to that place of authenticity where it is. And I'm asking you this because you're an artist, right? Have this incredible, unique craft that you can do on, and the influence is the divine source. I'm assuming it's not. Oftentimes we are influenced by, when I say people, I see God, I see the divine in my fellow man. That's how I see it. Is there any resonance with that? I mean, can you see that place of neutrality as being a place from where you create, or how do you create?
That's a big question. I I honestly don't feel like I create from neutrality. I actually feel like I create from desire. Um, I feel like I'll give an example. Uh, I studied art history. I got an art degree, and while I was studying art history, I learned about the ancient goddess figurines. The goddess of Willendorf is like a iconic goddess figurine, and the thing that's interesting about these is they've been found all over the world, and they fit in the palm of your hand, and usually they're simple forms of voluptuous women, and they're mysterious. No one really understands what they were for or what they were used for. And at a certain point a couple years ago, I would look at these things and I would feel desire in my body. Like I would feel like almost like a sexual tension looking at these figurines, and I didn't know why. But whenever I feel that in my body, I lean in, because through the years of creating ceramic sculpture, through the years of being an artist, that I know that the juice is there. Like even if there's some mystery, there's the seduction, there's a bit of fear and unknown, and those are the places that I like to go to create. And so as I like leaned in more deeply to these goddess figurines, I started imagining that these may have been created by women, actually, and maybe they were created by women in a kind of desirous state. And maybe these women were considering the fact that their bodies created life, and that this life would come out of their bodies. And maybe they also were considering that the whole that these creations would come from is in some ways a place of pleasure, but also some ways a place of pain, or a place that needs opening. And that all that creative center, desire is what creates people. The greatest creations that we can make is the creation of humans, and desire is what leads to that creation of humans. Without that, no people would exist. None of them. I mean, maybe some, but the majority of people come from a desirous state, and at least on everyone's part, I believe. And so,
Yeah.
I
Great explanation. So the purpose of the creation is through the passion, through the desire, not neutrality. Thank you for clarifying that. That was a beautiful expression. Thank you. Where I get that place of neutrality for me, and a place to actually not respond, not to be triggered. So I'm putting that in perspective and incorporating what you've just said. So thank you for that learning. Yeah, I get to integrate that. Isn't that the beauty? Like the integration process, knowing what you don't know until you know. And thank you for sharing that.
Oh yeah, of course. I'm not saying that my way is the way. That's just the way that I know.
No, but what you're talking about is the divine feminine. You're talking about the sacred circles, and when I watched a little bit of your video, well, I watched the whole video and I shared that. You know, that was passion.
Mm-hmm.
That was passion. Can you talk about the divine feminine? Can you talk about where the divine feminine is now, and what we can do to support it, support the divine feminine? Is that a fair question to ask?
Yeah, I can only speak for myself. Um, as a representation, I believe the divine feminine is within all of us. But I can say that the way that I access these big questions is through my personal experiences. And that's the way I came to astrology. That's the way I come to most things. What's my experience with this, and where am I at with this process? And I'll tell you, I'm in a place of learning how to trust, like learning. I feel I have very recently discovered that there's a difference between me loving, as that is love, and me receiving love. And I know that seems a little, for me, it was really surprising to discover that my definition of love my whole life was I love you, and that's love. I love you, and that is love, and that's enough. I love you, that's enough. And just in the past little while, I've learned that the more I begin to trust the divine masculine, and the more I begin to trust being in my feminine, the more I'm able to actually receive love. And receiving and being receptive requires a great deal of trust for me, and a great deal of feeling safe in my body, and feeling safe in my world. And I know that for most of my life, I haven't felt safe, not because I was being threatened, but energetically, it's so much safer to have a more masculine presence, I guess, more of a doing presence, more of a giving presence, more of a pleaser presence than a receiving presence. And so it's a very new concept for me to be so receptive and so feminine and so trusting. And so if I was going to speak for the divine feminine, I would say the divine feminine is arriving and is very powerful and is ready to receive and ready to let the polarity shift and to show up as that receptive presence.
And we're coming, you know, a lot of theories were the end of the world, the end times, all of this stuff, and was now we're talking about, as it comes to astrology, this was out of the age of Pisces and into the age of Aquarius, or is it the other way around?
I know you have it right.
And I don't even know what that means. I just, you know, paying attention. Do you know what that means?
Yeah, from my understanding, there are these eras that mark consciousness, and they're long eras. So the era of Pisces was like 2,000 years long and change, and during that time, we were um, we were investigating themes around Christianity. We were investigating themes around the um, victim martyr villain triangle, and so we were investigating the dynamics of the savior and the, you know, all of this, and needing an external guru to save us, or needing a bridge to heaven. And I feel that that was really important for us to experience, because now as we move into a new era, we're being faced with themes where there's so much more information available to us about how our human body system works, and how we've been the bridge all along, and how we actually are embodied in Christed energy, and that we are here embodied as Christ, and that we are the bridge. And this is a lot of information. It's a lot to swallow after 2,000 years of believing that we need an external bridge to get us to our salvation. And not only that, but that we can have salvation while we're alive. And you know, these are heavy responsibilities to allow ourselves to hold. And so I believe that's why there's so many people stepping into leadership around this right now, because a lot of people are coming into this awareness of like, wow, I'm a very powerful creator. I'm a bridge. I am the key, and my connection to source is direct. I'm the direct bridge. So how am I that? How am I? So this is the age of Aquarius, where all the keys have been given to us, and what do we do with them? So we want to educate ourselves, or we want to find a teacher, or we want to find a path. You know, we want the teachers to teach us how we can be whole. You know, we don't want to give our power away to a teacher anymore. We want a coach to lead us, but we don't want anyone else to be the hero of our story. We understand that we're not a victim of our circumstances, but we don't know how to not blame, how to not blame something. So
You know, that's
this is
we don't have to blame. It's we've come out of this age of victim martyrhood to being creator, God man, God woman. You have all of the keys. It's all inside of you. There's no guru out there. That Christ consciousness is inside of you. It's all you. You are the most powerful creator that exists.
man, and
That's the magic. You don't have to be sick. We don't have to be sick. And so often we give our power away. We give it away. We say, no, that's, you know, and we listen to others.
we've just been conditioned to be in that triad. It's a powerful triad.
Now, I take 100% responsibility for my world, but I didn't get to this place without a significant amount of pain.
Mm-hmm.
It was my own suffrage, you know. So I do have a pointed question to ask you, and if you wouldn't mind, do you think that, you know, we all need to suffer? Do you think that humanity needs to suffer to get to this point where they're awakened? Or I mean, Or do they have to experience this, the same dark night of the soul that you and I have described, of like being nothing and, you know, tearing and ripping at the hairs? So I'm curious what your perspective is. Happy to share mine with you prior to your answer. Like, it's whatever you feel most comfortable.
Well, you know, I've contemplated this a lot myself. I'll admit that some of my spiritual journey was definitely because I wanted to reduce the amount of suffering I had in my life. Like it was a strong motivator. I have a group called Learning Through Grace and Ease, please, because I've learned a lot of lessons through pain. But I have to admit that even earlier today, I was in a suffering state. And I was sitting out on my deck and I was like, oh, I have to figure this out. You know, I was like, my brain was in a spiral and I was suffering. I was crying and I just put my head up and I put my arms out and I said, I need your help. Like, I need help. Like, I need help. Like, I don't feel like I'm enough right now. And even with all the knowing that I am enough, even that all the knowing that I'm complete and whole, I still find myself occasionally in the space and I trust that whenever I get to that place, it's actually a threshold. Like, I know that my thresholds, when they come, they really grind me up a little bit, and that I can choose to do a lateral shift when I reach those thresholds and do something that's the same as what I've done, just a lateral, like, it's like, okay, well, I'll just move over here and it'll look different. It's like changing boyfriends, even though the pattern's the same. I'll just change my behavior. I'll change this. But I know now that when I feel this suffering, it's an opportunity for a vertical shift, a vertical threshold jump. And I was like praying for this vertical, like, show me where the vertical shift is and I will do it. I'm ready. And I believe that suffering still plays an important role in my life in getting me to that place. So I don't believe that we have to suffer for long periods of time. It took me like 30 minutes to process the suffering, maybe an hour, but I honor the suffering. I'm grateful. I see it. I was like, I can't stand it when you visit, but I'm so grateful for your presence, because that's where the juice comes from. That's where like I get the juice. And someone saying, change the state. Exactly. Like what I did, I put my shoulders back and I went out in the sun and I put my head back, and that physiology shifted my suffering state into a more resourceful state. And I was able to channel new information and energy from that. And even though it wasn't instant, it totally shifted. I started having new questions immediately, and the new question shifted. So your question is, does suffering have to exist? I mean, only if we find it to be a valuable ally. That's my answer.
Integrate the lesson in the suffering and not, stay in that state for, long periods of time. What I my own process is that the suffering, I've gotten myself into a loop in times where I just kept playing the same loop. And it's almost Clifford's brilliant at this. Clifford brought this up. I asked Clifford Starks, and this guy's he's a world-class athlete, MMA fighter, and an incredible coach too. And I asked him the question. He said, yeah, I know everybody's got to suffer. And I've asked others, and like my friend Dr. Patrick Scott, who's a master at Huna. He teaches NLP and Huna. He's a brilliant man, and he's given me a little different take. That we don't all have to suffer. Yes, I experienced pain. Yes, he's been through cancer. He's experienced pain, but we didn't suffer. It says didn't suffer. Okay. I've experienced suffering. I've experienced pain. And Rumi says, you know, pain, the crack is where the light shines, right? It's illuminated, but you know, for how long and when, to the point where we can integrate the lesson. Which brings me back to the whole point of this, this interview was what your unique gift that you're bringing to the table. This map, whole map, a soul path map. That is your unique contribution in what you've been. Because I, quite honestly, Christina, we could spend hours and talking, and you bring so much value, and I'm grateful and thankful for the conversation. I look forward, continuing it. But getting back to the point of what your unique contribution is today and now, and with your unique gift that you're bringing out, do you have a call to action at this point for your gift? Is there, if you're speaking to the audience out there, you've got something you want to do, will you share that with us and how others might participate along with you in this journey?
Absolutely. I am looking to speak to people who know that they're having some unconscious patterns meeting their needs. I'm looking for people who know that they can meet their needs even more consciously and even more fulfilling in their lives. And they have some confusion. They're stuck in some way. They're so close to unraveling the pattern, but they perhaps could receive a slight nudge, a little bit of a perception shift that will help them to see their reality from a slightly different place and recognize that their unique blueprint is actually this beautiful snowflake, to bring that up. And so I'm looking for people who are wanting to navigate through meeting their needs more in a more fulfilling way. And the call to action would be to friend request me on Facebook, and I'll receive the friend request. Message me, and I will send you a link to where you could schedule, or I'll reach out to you personally, and we'll schedule a call. I'm dedicated to reading 100 charts in the next 2 months, and so I would love to speak to as many people as possible. There's a brief questionnaire because I'm collecting data for this. Your case study will be involved in a greater study, and for anyone who wants to lean more deeply into this work, I actually teach a 6-week course on this too, where each week we dive deeply into each need and how each person individually meets that need. So there's that body of work available, but just talking to people and collecting this data is the place I'm at now. So friend request me on Facebook, message me on Facebook, and we'll start a dialogue. We'll schedule something for the next 2 weeks, and we'll get rolling with it.
Wonderful. Yeah, my unique experience was riveting. No doubt. It was right on. In fact, I'm going to have to get back with you on that at some point because there was so much information there. Dear friend Brandon Bothazar just tuned in. You know, there are some amazing beings on planet right now, and I'm so honored, so graced to be in presence. This is really good stuff. So you heard it, folks. Reach out to Christina Luna. That's a call to action. Reach out. She's got an opportunity for you, and I'm assuming there's no cost at this, or is there? Forgive me. I didn't mean to give away your.
No, I'm not charging for these 100 readings. Of course, if you want to contribute, if you want to donate something to the production of this manual, the production of this work, maybe I should create some kind of link for that. I would gladly receive donations. But I'm not charging for the readings. I would love to lean more deeply. I'm very analytical. I'm a researcher and an artist, and I love having quantifiable data for the esoteric, and so you'd be doing me a great service to allow me to give you this reading and being vulnerable enough to talk to me about the way you currently meet your needs so that we can actually use this data to serve the greater good.
Well, I'm going to, I'll drop this into my YouTube channel. I'll put the recording up so it'll be available on my YouTube channel. For those of you that are tuning in for the first time, I am Rick Ely, the Breath of Ely. Thank you. Just connect with me on Facebook as well. Would love to see you out here. And I do this every Tuesday at 6 p.m. on Live Masters TV and the Breath of Eli. If there are those that you, and thank you, Angelina Romero Hall, you are just absolutely wonderful, beautiful. Angelina called me up and she said, Rick, you've got to interview Christina Luna. She was inspired and I took it to heart, boom, and here we are today. And so if there are those that you think that that it would be wonderful if I were to interview them, please let me know. I'm happy to reach out and make that connection. We're all connected. There is this unity, and you are just in my opinion, a beautiful reflection of me. And so I just want to say thank you so much, Christina. Is there anything else that I can do for you before we say good evening?
You've just been the most beautiful reflection for me as well. I feel kindred connection to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, well, good night and aloha.
Aloha.